that mentality around time entry is a huge reason why they get stuck. A huge one. I say it often, and I say it rather callously, but the gas in my car, the food on my table has been paid for by MSPs struggling to get their arms around time entry. If the first time I said time entry or spoke to a crowd about time entry 18 years ago, if everyone would have said, great, I'll do that, and that was the new standard, Gary, I don't know that I'd be in business today. I really don't. I think it's when we look at all the problems we solve in Vision, at Bering McKinley, our ConnectWise consulting, almost every problem traces back to, tell me the story of how we got here. And that story starts with time entry. And we won't be able to understand how to fix this problem that seems very tangential to time entry, but it turns out it's the root of the issue is the time entry. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the BMK Vision Podcast. Gary, we've got kind of a fun one. It's tired. Like I get exhausted talking about this, but I think it's important enough that it gets mentioned often enough that we do have to address this. So in the last month, I've had 3 conversations, one with an old client from way back in the day, really kind of a client, and then had someone else email me asking the question, and then had another opportunity to chat with somebody at an event, bringing up the same topic. And I want to check in with you to see if I'm crazy is kind of the thing. So
Okay.
here it is. The idea of time tracking being a bad culture. Requiring that time getting entered is going to have a negative impact on culture, and that it's just kind of micromanaging. So in one of the conversations I had with somebody I knew forever ago, they were talking about, yeah, Josh, I heard you, I hear you say it, but it just isn't that important. And, we know when things are going well, we know when things aren't going well. And then threw in a couple of other things I'll kind of share, as we go here. But again, am I crazy? Am I making a bigger deal out of this than what it needs to be?
Yeah, I I think when you don't know what good time entry looks like, um, it's easy to dismiss it. But once you know, like once you sat in our seats and you kind of ran a business that does time entry well, or you've helped other people perform better with time entry, it's just really hard to say that it's not important. I mean, it's breaking my brain right now.
I know, right? It literally does break the brain. And I think anybody who ever said it, they're not dumb. They're not like, uh, unaware of the benefits, but I think they get to this place where it's like, maybe they were an engineer, maybe they were a technician and they hated doing it and they never got to that stage of understanding why. And then if you even continue that and kind of think about, okay, well, you worked at another place and they insisted you do it, but maybe that your old manager didn't understand why. Maybe it was just this kind of like, I don't know why we're just supposed to do it type of thing. Um, because again, no one who doesn't believe in it is dumb. They just don't understand the why behind it. And it's, can you come up maybe even as a consultant with enough logic and outcomes to overwhelm the negative that they might think it infers about their culture?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, strictly on a culture, right? Like, are we making them do too much? Is it getting in the way of them performing their quote unquote normal job, right? Does it feel hard? And yeah, all that stuff's true, except the outcome that you get when you don't have it just totally refutes all of it. So, I it's one of those things where it's like, it's like have you heard of this unlimited PTO mechanism that people offer?
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
what that really turns into? So, for the audience, for unlimited PTO, it's like this mechanism where, you get hired, you have a salary, and the PTO is offered. They say, unlimited, take as much time off as you want. But since it's not defined, there's all this guilt and shame that creeps in with you taking time off. And
Yeah.
what ends up happening is people take way less time off because they don't really know what they're supposed to take off. So in the same in a similar way, the time entry thing, it's like, you want to remove this from from the engineer's mind of like, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine, we'll figure out a different way to bill, we bill flat rate, whatever it is. But then you realize like, oh, they're not putting in their time, or the billing does get affected, or I don't really understand my profitability, or and then the other thing is, then they get overworked. There's all these other things that happen because time isn't put in. So on the surface, the virtue of not putting it in seems really good, but you got to look underneath.
I like that virtue word. I've been talking about this topic for, my whole adult career. And, I kind of heard every argument and, maybe there's one I haven't heard yet. I haven't heard the one I haven't heard yet, but I've heard the ones I've heard dozens, hundreds of times. The so I've built up quite an arsenal of talking points on it. The one that has started resonating with me recently, I want to kind of test it on you because I also want your thought on an adjacent topic. Is it practical to think of time entry separate from notes on what you did? Can those be separated, or when we say time entry, is it enough to say we're really talking about grade notes and time entry?
You need both.
Uh,
So,
right, we need both. Are they the
yeah.
same thing though? Like, is it good if when I say time entry as a former MSP owner yourself, do you hear or what do you hear when I say good time entry?
I hear both. I hear I
Okay,
need I need time entered in each day. Um, and I also hear, proper notes within, and I think they serve two similar but different functions.
that's right. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say it, and I think that's what most people mean when or hear when I say it. But just wanted to check on that. So, if those two, if time entry means both those things, then when I think of my list of reasons why people need to do awesome time entry, the latest argument point I added to that list is when you inevitably find yourself on the wrong side of a lawsuit, when you inevitably find yourself answering to an insurance company or an incident response team, not having that documentation excellent, including when did you actually touch it, or imagining yourself on the stand of saying, you said your tech did this thing. When was that again? Show me. Because we subpoenaed all your PSA records and we don't see any time entries about this. Like that alone, that kind of fear logic is enough for me to say we document everything. How do you feel about that as one of many compelling reasons why time
I
entry
think,
is so critical?
yeah, I've heard that argument.
Okay, because I made that up in my head, by the way. So
Yeah, no, I've heard it.
yeah.
We probably leveraged that at times here and there for clients to understand like why we're offering superior service or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's a edge case. Ultimately, I
Sure.
don't think, you're not getting subpoenaed all the time. You're not in a lawsuit every year,
Right.
potentially. So it's a bit
Kind of
of
an
a red
edge. I
herring.
like that word.
Yeah, I think there's some grounds to say that it's appropriate to think that way in a certain way. Um,
Mhm.
but what's more realistic, like why do those notes matter? Um, you know, couple reasons that I can come up with that are more important than what you brought up would be, does the company that you're working for understand what's being done?
Mhm.
Like, how do you communicate back that you've done anything,
Mhm.
right? And often, if there's no time entry, there's no communication, which leaves a lot of clients wondering what's going on. And then the
Right.
other side of it is, internally. can you decipher what's been done, and can you pick up where you left off, and can you learn from the system that's in place? So with no time
That's right.
entry, it's impossible. With some time entry, it's better, and with great time entry, it's something that you can depend on. So those are
That's
obvious,
right.
but also if you're saying no time entry is required, you're missing a lot.
That's right. That's right. So I think the one of the challenges that MSPs face with uh, time entry and a few other adjacent items is um, they're moving at such a fast speed, and they're really kind of that first layer of a ticket or any sort of engagement with their client is, do we have the chops to fix this thing? Are we even able to fix it? How are we going to fix it? Did I put the right tech on it? So much effort gets put into, can we actually fix the thing? Uh, and entering that time doesn't help you get the job done. So there's not like this immediate reward of, oh, I Googled it. I figured out how to do the thing. I did the thing. It's more like, okay, I put my start and end time in and I put some good notes in. There's no like, what's that chemical? Not endorphin. What's that? Whatever that
Dopamine?
chemical. What is it?
Dopamine?
Yeah, there's no dopamine hit associated with that action, either for the manager, the owner, or the technician. So there's no real fun, immediate reward. The whole point, as you and I know, is you're building your data. It's a data input to, at the very least, for a managed services, type of contract to see if we are profitable or not. And
Mhm.
if we presuppose that everyone cares about tracking that agreement gross profit, well, you and I are naive if we believe that. So if the MSP is not ardent students of AGP, well, man, getting them to see the value in time entry is really tough.
Yeah. No, I think it starts with the goal, right? So agreement gross
Yeah.
profit is what you just brought up. And I think, yeah, if the MSP understands what that is and how time entry affects that by, tracking their costs essentially, potentially, creating revenue that may be
Right.
missing. Um, that's kind of the goal for the company. I'll push back a little bit, right? The dopamine aspect of it, I think everything is a game at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And having the game wrapped around the number of tickets, the total amount of time put in by tech, some competition, whether it's you know, in intra or inter competition between the
Mhm.
department or maybe themselves, attaching the outcome to their compensation. These are all ways to create that dopamine that you're talking about, which is a real
Yeah,
driver, right? So I think
absolutely.
that there's ways to solve for that. But if you don't have a goal around why the time entry exists at a higher level, then there's no solving, or there's nothing that time entry is going to do that solves a problem. So I think you're right there.
That's really well put as well, tying into, like, if you don't have a goal, if you don't have a problem you're trying to solve, or two separate things. If you don't have a problem you're trying to solve, then finding the compelling reason to really get time entry great, that's one problem. If you don't have a goal of, we're trying to reach this service department gross profit or this AGP or this EHR, and we'll only know if we're getting it if we have good data. If you don't have one or both of those things, you're stuck. And on that theme of stuck, uh, why do MSPs get stuck? I mean, we've been doing several episodes around this. That mentality around time entry is a huge reason why they get stuck. A huge one. And I say it often, and I say it rather callously, but the gas in my car, the food on my table has been paid for by MSP struggling to get their arms around time entry. If the first time I said time entry or spoke to a crowd about time entry 18 years ago, if everyone would have said, "Great, I'll do that," and that was the new standard, Gary, I don't know that I'd be in business today. I really don't. I think it's when we look at all the problems we solve in Vision at Bering McKinley, our ConnectWise consulting, every problem trace almost every problem traces back to tell me the story of how we got here. And that story starts with time entry. And we won't be able to understand how to fix this problem that seems very tangential to time entry, but it turns out it's the root of the issue is the time entry.
Yeah, I think it's almost the other way around too. It's like, can you even look at things without the time entry? Like it's a basis of for everything, right? So when you start to try to figure out why you're not profitable or where the profit's coming from, and you don't have the time entry, you end up just guessing. So solving any problem, as you said, kind of does get back to, well, do you have time in? If not, what data are you using to prove any of this stuff?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Hey, side note, and we're going to keep going here. So I oftentimes, drink something while we're doing this. You've heard of these things, right? These Stanley Cups.
Is this a commercial?
It's not a commercial. It's kind of the opposite of a commercial, and we're probably going to get copyright striked and all the things. I can't believe that we have one of these in my house. Like, I think these are so obnoxiously overplayed. Now, it's a good cup, whatever. But did your household get hit with Stanley Cup-itis, snap-ins and gadgets and all the stuff?
We have all of them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's incredible. This showed up. Somebody must have got it for Christmas, but I'm like, oh, I used to make fun of these. Like I used to think this was so silly. It's a fine cup. I don't think I'm going to get any of the snap-ons or add-ons to it, but I wanted to acknowledge that yes, this is in fact a Stanley Cup. So
it's funny.
yeah. Anyway, side note, when we think about the time entry argument, and it shouldn't be an argument, but it really is. Um, maybe share some thoughts around the idea of like, uh, you think you're profitable, you think you're utilized, but you cannot say that phrase definitively. You're really just guessing. That intuition thing. Maybe you have some thoughts around that. Whether is it okay to have intuition and guess if you're profitable or utilized, or is it like why even bother? You either prove it or you don't.
Yeah. Um, my initial thought when I hear, well, let's just say one, right? Like, let's just say, no, we're profitable. We're making a certain net profit a year. But we don't track time because it's inconvenience. My question is for how long,
Mhm.
right? Like, how long do you think you can scale this by not managing to these numbers? Um, what kind of outcome do you expect with low to little little accountability in your service department? What kind of customer service do you think you can provide when there's no clear communication of the work being done outside of emailing and phone calls to the client that get lost in the ether? How long does that
Right.
last?
Right. Right. Yeah, that could be the case of what got us here won't get us there. When you're 500,000, which, shout out if you're 500,000, that's awesome in revenue. But certain things that got you there, like, do you have to be masters of time entry? Probably not. Do you have to understand your P&L at the deepest levels? Probably not. But if you don't recognize that it's a journey that starts now to get to the place where, hey, one day this won't work for us. It's that fallacy of thinking this is our secret sauce when we're at 500,000. This is what makes us special or unique or different. Uh, and that you're just going to carry that forward. Well, you're just going to run into some terrible brick walls, and the problem's only going to be harder to solve later.
Yeah, because you
Right.
got to
So,
scale. You got to scale everything at that same level, right? So what's probably happening, let's say you're at $1 million, right? And you don't track time and, let's say you have 10 clients and, they're all doing like $100,000 a year. Like you figured it out, right?
right.
Um, it seems like everything is equal. It seems like this is how I sell, this is how I service. Everything is always going to work this way. I've figured out this thing and I'm acknowledging that I'm unique, right? Like we do everything against the grain of what the MSP industry says to do,
Mhm.
or at least a big portion of it, right? Well, then you've written in stone where how you have to scale. So now you need the same exact clients that like to be billed the same exact way, that like to have the service done the same exact way, and your technicians have to perform the same exact way. Um, and man, if that's the definition of uniqueness, like, you know, w- I worry about, you when you find out the day that not everything is gonna go in the same exact way, you know?
Mhm.
Um, what happens when you get it, or do you not take a new client that wants to be billed a different way? Do you not take a new technician that doesn't necessarily work exactly the same way that your other 5 buddies that, you hired, work? Things just change. So so kinda getting back to the basics of how a business is ran, service business specifically, uh, it's all about the hourly work, you know? You gotta make an hour, every hour you work, you gotta make some money and you gotta pay for that work. Um,
You know, that that hit me. It took me, as I've said too many times in the past, I've been doing what I do since like 2004, and I remember that transition to managed services. That kind of that first wave in like '08, '09, 10, and having spent, the previous 4, 5, 6 years where everyone is doing pretty much, blocks of time and just straight hourly billing. And at that stage, telling an owner about time entry and there was tools evolving that was going to make it so much easier and whatnot. It was really um, why aren't the techs entering their time? And it was usually like the tools kind of sucked. We didn't really have dispatch dialed in yet, so everyone was having to scramble to do everything. But everyone in the company knew we have to enter this time. It's the only way we get paid. The only way the company gets paid. So that was kind of an easy era of having the conversation, and then it was just about, figuring out how to inspect at the same rate you expect and whatnot. Then in like '08, like, I had a just huge mental block. It probably took me 6 months to kind of figure out, like, well, why is time entry still important? You're doing everything all you can eat, and, um, man, the revolt against time entry during that era was huge. Like, we everyone's on salary, and we're getting the same amount from every client every month. Like I said, that took me, like, 6 months to kind of work through it to figure out, like, "Oh, well, this is gonna be a capacity issue. How much more could you do if you just say everyone feels busy, so we can't take any more clients? It's kind of like thinking about a production line or manufacturing where it's well, what would happen if we turn the speed up on the conveyor belt a little bit? Could we move 10% more units? And that kind of started the journey for me of coming to in my own head that effective hourly rate concept.
mhm,
And more specifically to your point, it's if you can't perform better in a managed services world than you were doing when you would bill hourly, then why are you doing it? And if you still want to argue that it's cash flow and easier, I'm with you all the way. But no matter how you run it during our lifetimes, it's always going to come down to what did you pay the person and how much were you able to make per hour with them? Like
yeah,
that's as simple as it can be said right there. And
yeah,
so you
this
always have to be tracking that.
all-inclusive this all-inclusive pricing really, like, mess with people's brains. And it
Mhm.
feels great at first, especially if you're transitioning from hourly. Man, gives me a headache sometimes to think about it. When you're transitioning from hourly to, all, managed service contracts, by definition, meaning all inclusive, um, or at least that's what it was once upon a time.
Right.
It's like, oh, I can guarantee this bill coming in each month. So
Mhm.
that feels really good. It feels really
Right.
good. But the side that I think people miss a lot on those contracts are what happens when you don't bill the client from the client's perspective? What happens when you don't actually do work for them? So your effective hourly rate goes up, right? Let's say you're supposed to do 10 hours a month to get $3,000 a month,
Mhm.
but you do 1 hour. How long is that 1 hour gonna be enough for that client to say, "Yeah, I'm good with this service?"
Right.
Is it 6 months, 12 months? What is that? So they and really that's the best case scenario. The
Mhm.
worst case scenario is the client goes, "Oh, I just added 20 people, but I'm flat rate, so it's all on you, MSP."
Right.
And you have no justification of how much work is being done for that client, and eventually you just get mad at the client.
Right.
But you started this. You
Yeah.
s you set it up this way.
Yes.
So it's like, we gotta remember that, like, when we think about effective hourly rate, yeah, it's within a band, like, you wanna be competitive, but, like, if you're billing, let's say that client, for $3,000 a month, let's say you bill 5 hours, so you're getting $600 an hour? How long until someone comes by and goes, "I'll charge you $500 an hour."
Right. Right.
You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
400? Is that a good deal? You know? So, we forget that the market is available for people to go and look at, both from a competitor standpoint and for our clients. So, people get tired of overpaying.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not totally down with the only charge per hour, but
No.
I'm down with measuring based on that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, you really start getting, and this is like these conversations around time entry are so much more um data backed and data driven than they were 10, 15 years ago. So it's as much as I hate having to revisit this for our clients and for MSPs, because I just wish they would all just do it. I know their lives would be better. It is still kind of fun to have the conversation, remind ourselves why it's so important. We wrote a blog piece at least 15 years ago, and it was probably a rehash of something we wrote 5 years before that around time entry. And you look at all of our stats, on our blogs and whatnot, every year since the day it got posted, it is the most viewed content on our website. It would just it's amazing. That's cool. We probably need to rewrite that thing with better information today, but um it's it's now, uh, interesting to me when somebody questions any time entry. Like, I'm kinda used to, is it really that important that they enter their time as they go? Is it, really should we round the time or should we not round the time? Like, that's good, reasonable conversation, that we can work through. It's not often that I get the "we shouldn't enter time," but like I said, in the last month, it's come up 3 times, and that just blows my mind.
Maybe give me some more examples of one of these conversations that you had. Was there anything else that they added to it? I mean, simply just not,
Sure.
I'm not gonna enter time. What else did they add to it?
Yeah, they what they kind of get into a lot of, like, the common theme is, there's obviously the we're profitable, so why does it matter? There's the cultural piece of that feels micromanagey, that feels like a sweatshop. We don't want people to have to focus on billable utilization. That's old school. That's what where we've all come from, and we hated it, so we're gonna do it different here. The probably the and those are all like cool. We can work through all those. The one that comes up that's kind of like interesting to me is like that idea that I don't want my team to focus on how we're billing the client. I want them to focus on working the problem. And if I put this other thing on them that they have to bill this certain amount, that they're going to do weaker work, they're going to be rushing so that they can, you know, ta- not necessarily rushing, but they're going to be trying to milk things along so that they can hit some arbitrary number. So I want to be I want them focused on just doing good work, not on meeting some goal that I have for them. That one's always kind of the most interesting one because it dovetails into 10 other topics.
We'll be right back with more, but first, here's a quick message from Bering McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Bering McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Yeah, so when I hear something like that, it's just like, I'm sure they have more information behind that, but let's pretend for a minute they stop there and they're like, that's the reason, right? We don't want them to game the system and affect the client's bill, or maybe we're incentivizing the wrong way. The That's like level one thinking for sure. Like don't do that. Uh Level two thinking might say, well, do we just ask them to put in an hour's worth of work? Or do we wrap metrics around how long things should be able to be taking, right? So,
Yeah.
if it's like, hey, we want you to enter time to get, 75% utilization, and you put one ticket in at 8 a.m. and then you clock it out at 4 p.m. and you did your job for the day, and all it was resetting someone's computer or something, like, sure. This is an extreme case. Obviously, probably doesn't
Right.
happen often, but just put things into context.
Right.
Um, are we paying attention to the type of tickets that we're doing? And this is where the notes come in, where the dispatch comes in. Should that ticket take 8 hours or 6 hours, or should it take 15 minutes?
Mhm.
So if that ticket was supposed to take 15 minutes, now we have something actionable to do. So let's just say they put in 6 hours. We go back, we review the time because it's available in this case. We find out, hey, you put in 6 hours for a 15-minute ticket. Now we have something to work with.
Right. 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 Yeah. How will you know? Right. Other than just your subjective feeling of things take longer than they should have. Now you have
Which,
data to support it.
how many times have you heard that?
That right there is such a hard conversation with owners who are very technical. Is me having to vet through, like, okay, I already know you're a brilliant tech. You're a level 4. You've been doing it for 25 years. When I hear you critiquing, Junior, the level 1 guy, and saying it took him 3 hours to do that, that should have taken 25 minutes. I'm like, you know better than me whether it should have taken 2 hours, 45 minutes, 3 hours. So I have to believe you. But I must remind you, senior owner guy, you're special, right? Of course it's gonna take the other person longer. What manual are you looking at other than your own lived experiences of how long something should have taken? And I imagine, just kinda knowing you, when you own your MSP, I could see you being a real tough case around that, where you're watching your techs work and they're getting stuff done, and in your mind, at least, you're like, "Why did it take that long?" Like,
Oh,
how did you balance that? Because 'Cause you're just a guy that gets shit done, and you know how you would attack a problem. Did that drive you
It's
nuts, or how did you
insane.
feel
It's
about
insane, and I think, when I was running my business and I made a phone call to you, and
it? Okay.
before we even engaged and you helped me with my business, and I was telling you how I set up my dispatching model and this is the way I'm gonna do it, and I was sitting there by myself for a week. I had, like, a couple guys out, and I had to do all the work and stuff, and
Mhm.
you were like, "Man, that looks incredible." I was like,
Yeah.
"Wow, thanks." And then you're like, "Just the bad news is it'll never work."
Oh, man.
But it was true because it was like, this is the way that that I can run the business if I'm doing literally all the work, because I was in the position where I had to do all the tickets and all the dispatching and everything because I had all these people out. And I was like, "Oh, well, if you do it this way, then of course this is the way it works." But of course that's you can't expect, a system of people and processes to work that way. And I
Right.
think maybe getting back to the time entry, it's that's a great question. I think the same question is asked. It's like, okay, if the owner says, "Hey, I never need to put in my time. Look, I just do the work and then the customer's happy and then we bill." Um, yeah, how myopic is that? Are you just looking at everyone as if they're you?
That's it. I think that's it. That there's so much of that, especially when we're, on the smaller side, that kind of million, less than a million, a little more than a million. You're still living, many of us are living in this magical vacuum where it's like, "Oh, I only hired people that I knew and I love them and we're all working together. A dispatcher sounds crazy because this person's gonna interrupt what we already just organically know how to do." And if you incorrectly name that as your secret to success and don't step back and say, "Hey, this is a unique moment in time where we get to get away with this. We better be working on, version 2 of this as we continue to have to hire people who aren't all in our likeness." Because that is a real trap to fall into, is to think that, you've found this honeypot of amazing people who function at the same level that you do as a entrepreneur and just human being.
Yeah, let's pick apart this. I don't need time entry to be profitable.
Yeah.
Let's like one example. Let's say we have two clients, right? One of them's real noisy. We could feel that noise, right? They call every day. They call after hours. They're short on the phone with us. The owner's kind of a jerk. The ticket board just lights up with them. And then we've got this other client that's just normal. They're just happy to see us when we come. They submit tickets. They're reasonable on their requirements for a response in the right time. But we bill the same amount, right? And they're great contracts. Let's say they're 10 grand a month each. Do you have any opinion on which one's profitable if you don't have time entry?
I probably have an opinion. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, not as Josh, but as the business owner. Like,
Oh,
as
as
the
a
business
business
owner,
owner?
what's you feel that things aren't balanced, but what do you do about it?
Right, right. Yeah, I can
And
I can tell you. Yeah, go ahead.
well, it's not, back to kind of what you said about, like if you get sued or whatever. It's not about like, "Hey, Mr. Client or Mrs. Client, you know, you did 100 tickets with us last month. Like, that's way over what you should have done," type of argument that,
Uh,
you could potentially prove with tickets, even though your agreement most likely doesn't say anything about tickets because you're not creating tickets, or at
right,
least you're not creating time against them.
right.
Um, like, what do you do? Like, what is the solution there?
Yeah, you're stuck. You're really stuck. What actually happens in my experience is you just get really resentful of that client, and you badmouth the client, and now your techs and your team is bad mouthing that client, and it's just like a self-perpetuating cycle, and you don't see any way out of it. And then what happens is you go to some shitty conference in our industry, and some dickhead on the stage says, "Fire your bad clients." And it's like, dude, are they bad, or did you just miss the mark with your expectation setting, and you have no evidence to go and have a rational conversation. So instead of thinking and realizing you don't have the evidence to kind of support a mature conversation, you get emotional and just think they're a bad client.
Yeah.
That's kind of the dysfunctional thing that happens in those cases.
And 1 or 2 is reasonable, right? Like, I've fired plenty of
Sure,
clients over my years, and they were the
sure.
quote unquote right decisions at that time. But man, what if you didn't have to do it to the 3rd or 4th one, you know?
Right, right.
What does your business look like if you can just kind of objectively look at what's happening and understand like, hey, maybe I should just raise their price a little bit to make this thing worthwhile. Um, you know, uh, to me, it's just incredibly difficult to run the business without that data set.
Absolutely, absolutely, and there is that notion too, and I think it all speaks to that moment in time, in our case, when we get introduced to that MSP that's questioning time entry and that feeling that, "Hey, we're profitable." Okay, I'll come with you on that, and you'll show me your P&L, and it will be modestly profitable, 8, 9, 10%. The whole thing starts breaking apart if we try to have a structured conversation of, "Why are you profitable?" Right? There's no moment where we climb the ladder of that P&L and they, kinda say, "Because we've priced things relative to the cost of our labor, and we've predicted somewhat accurately how much time it will take us to serve that MSP or that client." That doesn't happen. It kinda comes down to nothing. It's a nothing conversation so many times, and I'll entertain the conversation as long as the client needs me to, but it's like you have no evidence, and until they feel some pain around trying to price that next managed services contract that looks a little different than the last one, or until they find that pain of they understand service salary service revenue ratio finally, and they're like, why are we 8 points high? Well, by the time you understand service salary service revenue ratio, you're pretty far down the road, and this is going to be an even tougher problem to solve.
Yeah, that salary part of the service salary to service revenue, that one is almost the most difficult to do because what your secret power here is underpaying your technicians.
Yeah.
That's probably what's happening.
Yes.
You're probably not paying them the rate that they deserve. And it doesn't necessarily mean their salary isn't right or appropriate for the position. What happens is they're overworked. There's overtime involved that they don't get paid for because they're on salary. So you've built this model of like, oh, I have this fixed cost for this resource. I could just continue to stack and stack and stack. But, one client could blow that whole thing up. They could be at
Yeah.
capacity, you add another 50 users, and the whole thing falls apart.
That's
So
right.
without tracking that time, you don't know what their capacity is. Of course, they're just saying yes because they're great employees, but eventually they break.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the really evolving mature, like either they're mature, they're evolving towards maturity, like service managers that we get to work with. A really fun moment is when they can visualize this triangle, this balance between service salary service revenue ratio, agreement gross profit, and billable utilization, and how fragile that triangle is balancing on this pencil of client and employee experience. And it's really fun when they can kind of describe that, or you ask them the first phase of that is being able to kind of give you the rotely memorized answer, and then watching them be able to kind of reference their own numbers, and then eventually really synthesizing that information to say, because this, because that, and because this other experience, I now know I've got a dispatch issue. Like watching them evolve into having that conversation is really cool. And that's a moment where they typically triple down um, on their time entry standard because they're now they know what they don't know, and what they don't know in that moment is, can I really trust my time entry numbers? Right? Because all of it is predicated on, can you believe the data input of the time spent, against the agreements or just in the system at all. So that's a cool place to get. I think owners don't celebrate that enough when that service manager's evolving to that. Uh, because they didn't learn it, right? And
Mhm.
that's no bad on them. They skipped that part of their career. A managed service owner didn't come up as typically as I was a tech, and then I did dispatch, and I did service manager. Now I own an MSP. I was a tech, and now I own a business. And so, what them having never learned that stuff and watching a service manager learn it, they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like that sounds good. So, but if they don't have that somebody on their team learning it, they have to learn it.
Yeah.
And that's a tough ask. You're learning 50 other things at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just the glue though. It's the glue that holds the whole thing together. So I think coming to the realization that that's true, even if you don't do anything, but knowing like, okay, I do have this, this extra bullet in my gun to like take care of that. That should give anyone listening some hope that there's a
Yeah, that's a
solution out there that
weird
helps.
kind of analogy. What's that bullet intended for, Gary?
It's to kill all your problems.
Oh, I got you. All right. And the
You
bullet
see what I'm saying?
is
It's like,
time entry.
it's like you're constantly just trying to like tamper down all of these fires, right? Like you're
Yes.
like, oh my God, this client's upset, and these servers keep on going offline, and my dispatcher doesn't really know how to organize the thing, and the service manager's upset because the one engineer, whatever these problems are, you just
Right.
continue to fight all these fires, but knowing like there is something at the base layer that needs to be addressed, like that is it. Like
Right.
start there, and then all of it kind of surfaces up from there, and then you can deal with all these individual issues.
That's right.
Um, and it really is that simple when you look at it holistically.
Yeah, that's really well said. And it's so kind of as we're having this moment in the conversation, I'm just thinking about so many client engagements where somebody comes to us with what seems like a complex issue, whether it's complex in terms of getting their ConnectWise connected to their QuickBooks, or how they're going to hire that next salesperson, or how they're going to spend their money in marketing. Um, and then we break the news to them that, hey, let's just get time entry better. And they even though they should feel really relieved, like, hey, here's that bullet in the gun that's going to solve these problems, and any of those problems I just mentioned are going to improve. You're going to get greater clarity on. Um, they're almost disappointed for us to point back to this really basic thing. It is just the most fundamental blocking and tackling, do this one thing. And, thinking of the folks that are in that headspace of, we don't do it, it's bad culture and all that stuff. Listen, I'll give you a pass if you're sub million. I'll give you a pass if you'll at least say, okay, I know I'm living in this moment, and this moment, it's not killing us, but I will acknowledge that I will have to address this sooner rather than later. I'll accept that. But a wholesale rejection of it, that's the most dangerous place for an MSP.
Agreed.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. Now, I am tempted, and I'm not gonna go there just yet, but I think we need to do an episode on the fallacy of managed services, and the kind of head junk that can get in our own heads about um, that kind of, hey, we get this fixed amount of money, we can take a breather on that, because it does tie into time entry really well. And I think we're seeing some shifts, and I'm kind of going off topic just a little bit here. We're seeing this shift where um, people's eyes are opening a little bit. Some MSPs, and usually kind of the more mature ones, saying, I want more hourly, I want more project, instead of me just being sad that that's what saved my P&L every month. that stuff we did outside the managed services, they're taking that as strong signal that, oh, I have to do this. This is how I could also grow, not just save the P&L in any given month. And if we take that trend to the logical next step, if we're going to get more heavily in hourly and project work, well, then we better really have a tight time entry policy in place and be really good at doing it
Yeah.
because the billing is going to depend on it. Let me kill that real quick. Yeah. So anyway, well, this is fun, Gary. I think the takeaway for me is there are MSPs that are still evolving, that still hang on to that notion that it's not critical. And my ask of them is to, look into your moment of where you're at, and be open to the idea that the thousands of MSPs that have come before you that are further along than you, they had to go through the same transition. You don't have to believe Gary and Josh and Ryan on this. You should, but just call some MSPs. Think about people you've met at industry shows and ask them about time entry, and be really open to the conversations, because you're going to be hard pressed to find many of them that don't take it much more seriously than what you think it is at this moment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, and I think like if your mindset is around, I don't want to affect my culture by creating this micromanagement layer. Um, Maybe think of it just more as leadership discipline. And I
Yeah.
love anywhere that you can introduce discipline into the business, breeds more discipline. So think of it that way.
Yeah, outstanding. Good deal, Gary. Well, good. Well, that was a fun conversation. I think we kind of covered the topic really well. And as always, anyone watching, put a comment. Give us a call, give us an email. We love talking about this. This is if time entry is something you struggle with. Look at your strategic plan. Look at the tactics you're putting in place, and start seeing if you can connect the dots as well. But we'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.